Hi everyone. It is January 5th, 2025, and I'm here in Rome, Italy. And for my New Year's resolution going into 2025, I wanted to create a YouTube channel that talks about my experiences traveling to Italy. So 2 years ago, for my New Year's resolution, I decided I would finally learn Italian. And I traveled to Italy a few times a year to practice speaking Italian. And I've been doing that for the past 2 years, and it's been about 4 times a year, just to come and explore the country and to practice speaking Italian. And my Italian's actually gotten pretty good. But for my YouTube channel, I actually want to start sharing just some of my tips about traveling to Italy, what I wish I've known before my first trip to Italy. So let's get started. So the first thing I would say is I wish I had known more about Italian history and the structure of the country before visiting. And what's cool, Italy has 20 unique regions. And it's important to note that Italy really wasn't unified until the 1800s. It was a bunch of separate countries, separate states that some would even fight with each other. And then, if you're a fan of the Game of Thrones, study the history of Italy and learn how the king up in Turin basically worked his way down the peninsula, threatened the Pope, and eventually led to the unification of Italy. It's a very fascinating story. But because of that, and also Italy, most Italians didn't start speaking Italian, what we know as Italian, until probably the mid 1900s. So after the creation of TV and TV programs became popular in Italy, more Italians started speaking Italian. But before that, they had their own regional languages. And what I really appreciate is they have their own regional cuisines. So if you go to Rome, Rome has dishes that it's known for. If you go to Napoli, they have pizza and other dishes that they're known for. So as you're traveling around Italy, just know what each region is known for. So for example, you probably get good pizza in Venice or in Milan, but Naples is really known for pizza, right? If you want good risotto, you would go to the Milan region. Um, Probably not going to get the best risotto down in Naples. So just keep that in mind. Just know what the regions are known for, particularly when it comes to food. The next thing I wish I had known is how to travel to Italy cheaply. So if you look at the price of I'm from Chicago, flights from Chicago to Rome or to Milan or to Venice can be pretty expensive, even flying coach. So what I wish I'd known a few years ago was to maximize earning points. So I fly American Airlines, and I have the American Airlines credit card. And what I found is a way of just maximizing the amount of American Airlines points that I earn throughout the year, so that I can then use those points to travel to Italy. And it's important to note that most Italians don't earn as much as we earn in the United States. So the average take-home pay is about, from my understanding, is about $2,000 a month. So things can be much cheaper when you come to Italy if you stay at the tourist hotspots. So if you're in Rome and you're near the like Trevi Fountain or the Colosseum, you eat at a restaurant there, it's going to be very expensive and it's probably not going to be very good. So yeah, if you just take a few steps away, a few streets away, you'll save a lot more money, and it'll be much more reasonable to travel to Italy. So yeah, earn as many points as you can. I earn a lot of American Airlines miles using the American Airlines hotel portal, and it's a way for me to just maximize the miles. And most times, if I'm doing a 1 or 2 week trip to Italy, I've earned enough points from hotels to either completely pay for a coach flight to Italy or to pay for maybe half of the flight using points. So that's something really important to know. And I might actually do a video on that, just maximizing American Airlines points and status. The other thing I wish I'd known is just more about trains. Italy has an amazing train system. The trains pretty much go everywhere. They have the high-speed train, they have the regional trains, and then they also have the slower speed trains. But you can get pretty much anywhere throughout the country by train. And actually, it's quite expensive to take flights. So, for example, I'm now in Rome. I was in Naples and Caserta, which is a smaller town that's north of Naples. But before that, I was in Sicily, and I was traveling to Sicily from Turin, and it was so expensive for me to get a flight from Turin to Palermo, which is where I ended up going. And I found different combinations of dates and all that. So I found one where I paid maybe 150 euros, which is a lot. But there were flights, and that was one way. There were flights that were maybe 500 euros one way, even 500 euros going from Palermo to Rome, which is absolutely insane. So, if you're going to travel by plane, including to Sicily or to Sardinia, I'd recommend booking far in advance. But to the extent that you can throughout Italy, take the train. It's the way to go. Get the Trenitalia app or the Italo app. So there are two main train providers in Italy. One is run by the government, the federal government in Italy, essentially, and that's Trenitalia. And they have the biggest network throughout Italy. So most of the trains that you'll take, if you're going to smaller towns, will be with Trenitalia. The other player is Italo, which is a private company, and they do most of the hotspots. So most of the big cities, you'll be able to take Italo. And I actually prefer Italo. I think they just provide better service. They can be cheaper at times, but definitely price compare the two. But if you're going, say, from Milan to Rome or Milan to Florence or um, uh, Rome to Napoli or Naples, price compare the two. And I would probably pick Italo over Trenitalia. But definitely get the apps. The apps are just great for checking train status, but also if you need to change, if you need to buy or change your train tickets, it's very easy to do that by an app, particularly if you have a changeable fare. So definitely do that. And then something that's very important. So in the United States, if you take Amtrak, there's going to be that one Amtrak train that leaves maybe every 15 minutes at that. But in Italy and throughout Europe, trains just there's such a high turnover. So there could be at one station in the course of 10 minutes, maybe three or four different trains could come through. So it's very important to check your train number and not the destination. So if you're going from, say, Rome to Naples, if you're looking at the destination name, it could say Salerno, right? Which is the final destination of the train. But then it stops at Caserta and Naples along the way. So don't look for the destination, look for the train number. And then definitely make sure you're getting on the right train. So something that I've done in the past, I actually did this twice, which is pretty crazy. I was traveling from Milan Centrale in the city, traveling to the Milan airport. And I was in a hurry. I had a late lunch, was in a hurry, and I asked one of the guys at the train station which was the binario, which was the state or the track for the train to Milan Malpensa, which is Milan's airport. And he was like, Binario Uno. So fine. So I go to Binario Uno. There's a train there, and I just get on that train. And so about maybe an hour or so later, okay, we got the police going by. So maybe about an hour later, I'm just like watching on my iPad, listening to music, just doing some research on where I wanted to go. I was actually leaving Italy early because they had bad storms a couple of years ago in May, and I was heading to Ireland for the first time. So, anyways, so I was just doing research on my iPad, and I glance out the window, and I see mountains, and I'm like, mountain? What the hell? Like there aren't any mountains near Milan Malpensa Airport, at least super close. And after an hour, I should have been pretty close to Malpensa. So I look on my phone and I open the map app, and it shows that I am up north near Lake Como. And if you know, Lake Como is actually kind of northeast of Milan as opposed to west, which is where I'm supposed to be going. So, anyways, I got on the wrong train, and there was no conductor or assistant on the train that was coming through on that particular train to check tickets. So, had they done that, I would have known that I was on the wrong train. But yeah, after an hour, I realized I was on the wrong train. I got off the train in a town called Lecco, I believe, which is close to Lake Como. and got a taxi, very expensive taxi from there over to Milan. So, anyways, very expensive mistake. Don't make that mistake. Check your track number, check the train number, and then actually make sure you get on the right train. And interestingly enough, when I left Milan last week, I was exhausted. I saw that the train was coming on a particular track, and I just got on the train that came without, again, checking the train number. Got on the wrong train. I don't do this. It's very rare for me to get on the wrong train now. Like in other cities, it's not an issue, but for some reason, I got on the wrong train that was heading to Milan Central, just not the right station for me. But ended up not being a big issue. I was able to take the Milan subway to the right station and then catch my train that was heading over to Turin. So, anyways, make sure you get on the right train. The next thing I'd recommend is learning the Italian language, or at least a little bit of the Italian language. And I wish I'd done that before my first trip to Italy. And something that you can learn that's very easy, that makes a big difference, is how vowels work in Italian. So vowels are different, and then they don't use the full alphabet that we use, say, in the United States. So it's very rare to see the letter K or the letter J, and probably some other letters in Italian too. But the vowels are very important. So what our letter A, right? So instead of pronouncing an A, they pronounce it A. And I'll give you some examples in a second. And then for us, what we call E, they call A. So their E, our E is their A, pronounced A. It's spelled same letter, but it's pronounced differently. Our I is their E. And then you have O, which for O, it's just more of an open O. And then U is U. So it's very important to know those as you are speaking Italian, right? So to give you a good example, you'll hear a lot, and I made this mistake too my first time. I saw the word for thank you, and I said grazie. So Grazie. Grazie. And I was saying grazie. But if you learn that the E is actually pronounced A, so it's actually pronounced grazie. They roll the R's too, but I'm sure they'll be forgiving. Even if you say grazie, I'm sure they'll be forgiving. I have not had an issue with that. If you don't roll your R's, fine. But it's actually grazie. And in most words in Italian, every vowel is pronounced. Like, it has pretty important weight. So remember A is A, Z, E, I is E, and then A, grazie. So yeah, and there are just other words that you'll just see, and just remember to pronounce the vowels in that way. There's some great channels for learning the Italian language. I recommend Easy Italian, and I'll put that in a link below. Another thing I want to talk about, and I've seen videos and comments about just racism in Italy. So is Italy racist? And as a black person traveling throughout Italy, particularly a black American, you'll see very few people who look like me, look like us if you're a black American. You'll see a bunch of immigrants from Northern Africa. But, I mean, to answer the question, do I think Italy is racist? Have I experienced racism? No. A lot of times what I have experienced is people thinking that not that I got treated badly, but people just thinking that I'm an immigrant from Africa. Or up north, they think that I'm visiting from France. So I've had people just start speaking French to me. But yeah, I have not had any negative experiences in Italy. That's not to say it doesn't happen. Actually, let me correct that. I did have one experience. I was in a small town in the Piedmont region, so about an hour or so south of Turin. And my dream is to one day have a pizzeria. And there was this pizzeria for sale in this small town. And I had visited it a few times. And the last time I was down there, I was at a little bar, cafe, and just having a meal. And this guy just kept looking over at me, like he was uncomfortable that I was there. And he just kept looking at me. And I don't care about stuff like that. Like, I'm like, you got a problem. We could have that conversation. But so I moved my chair, so I was looking directly at him. whatever. And he eventually got annoyed and left. But that's the only negative experience in over 10 trips that I've had to Italy. Um, and if anything, there's a bit of privilege, maybe American privilege, if you will. So when I show my U.S. passport, I mean, things completely change. So, for instance, I was in the Turin airport, or no, Milan train station, and the police will go around and do ID checks, and I didn't realize that at the time. Um, that they stop just everyday Italians too. So, but anyways, in the train station, I saw them just going around and checking people's documents, and I saw the guy. It's like a bunch of army members and police officers just going around checking ID, and I saw them glance over at me, and I'm like, they, I know they're coming to check my ID, and sure enough, they did. Um, and I showed them my U.S. passport. They scanned it, and I was good to go. I mean, you could see on their face that it was all good. And then I just saw them go around checking Italians' documents, and there was a group of people from Asia. They were checking their documents too. So if that happens to you, it's not likely that it is, at least in my experience, um, because you're black. It's just because they go around and check people's ID. And in fact, my friend who lives in Turin, white guy, Italian, he said he's had his ID checked 3 times in 1 month. So it's just what they do. So, do I find Italy to be racist? Nope. I travel, at least in my experience, no, I've traveled around the country in 13 of the 20 regions. I go to small towns. Again, if anything, they look at me like, why is this immigrant speaking Italian? I mean, it's kind of funny, but anyways, but yeah, I have not had any issues. All right, so let's talk food. So Italy, of course, has some of the best food in the world. Uh, and as I said before, each of the region has their own unique cuisines and languages and all that. So definitely, like, learn what the food is for a particular region. In Rome, you have some popular dishes such as cacio e pepe, carbonara, amatriciana, and there's one more that I always forget. But anyways, so when you go to a particular region, try the food of that region. When you go to Venice, definitely try the seafood. When you go to Naples, try the pizza. When you go to Sicily, try the arancini or arancine. So arancini is when you're in Catania, apparently. Arancine, the plural, is what you say in Palermo. Yeah, so try the unique food of those regions. There's obviously more than just those dishes in those regions, but try that. Stay away from the tourist hotspots. So if you're grabbing food at a restaurant that's looking directly at, say, the Colosseum, or that's looking at the Trevi Fountain, chances are the food is going to be terrible and it's going to be expensive. And the reason for that is because they get such a high turnover from tourists, and most tourists don't, quite honestly, don't know any better, right? So they're used to either Americanized Italian food, which can be hit or miss, honestly, um, or they think that what they're getting there is the way it's supposed to be prepared. So just know that if you're eating vicino or close to one of those spots, the food is probably going to be terrible. If you want to stop for a drink, do that. It's going to be expensive, but just know that you're not getting the best Italian food, most likely. Um, let's see, lunch times and dinner time. So one thing I wish I'd known is that, so restaurants for lunch, unless they're in the tourist hotspots, they'll be open always, but like authentic restaurants will generally be open from maybe 11, 11:30, 12 until about 2:30 or 3, and then they are closed. And then they will open for dinner 7, 6, 7, 8. Um, so if you want to grab lunch, a late lunch, your best bet is to go to one of the tourist hotspots or to go to a cafe or bar. And then bars in Italy are just what we call a cafe, right? But you can get drinks there in the evening, but that's where you go for your coffee. So you'll go there, or what I do sometimes, I'll just go to a restaurant, or I'm sorry, to a grocery store, and I'll grab just something to go from the grocery store. But yeah, outside those times, the authentic restaurants will be closed. So just keep that in mind. Let's see. Oh, one thing I wanted to add about racism in Italy. So one thing that concerned me was people would stare at me, and I'm like, all right, I know there aren't a lot of people who look like me in Italy. Like, what's going on? But what I've since learned is that in Italy, people just stare. Like, I see Italians staring at other Italians, like where I feel uncomfortable for the person being stared at. But it's just a cultural thing. So yeah, so that's one thing I want to add about racism in Italy. If you see people staring at you, it's most likely cultural. They probably don't mean anything. And if you're a black woman, they might be interested in you because apparently Italian men like black women. So get your groove back. Um, let's see. Oh, another thing is different in Italy. So breakfast is different. So in America, we're used to having our pancakes and our scrambled eggs and our bacon and all that. Um, in Italy, it's a bit different. So you're not going to find the typical American breakfast with scrambled eggs and all that unless you go to a restaurant that's catered towards American tourists, or your hotel has a buffet. So yeah, so the American or British breakfast you're not going to typically find. What you'll find is that most Italians will eat kind of a sweet breakfast. So they'll have a coffee and then they'll have a cornetto. So it's a croissant. It's supposed to be different than a croissant, but to me it just seems like a croissant with different fillings. So you can get pistachio cream or just regular cream, and things like that. So just know that the breakfast will be different, and that if you really want scrambled eggs and bacon and things like that, then you're gonna have to search those things out. Um, Another thing, the weather in Italy. So right now it's early January and I'm in Rome. As you can see, I'm not wearing a jacket, and it is 57 degrees. It was a high of 58 degrees. I was down in Sicily. It was about the same, maybe a little bit warmer, and it's in January. So the thing I like is just the weather compared to Chicago right now. Like there's just, I think they're getting a snowstorm. And it's very freezing. It's pretty much freezing there right now. Um, so I would just keep that in mind that it's not going to be super cold unless you're up in the mountains in January or December or January. But on the flip side, summers in Italy can be absolutely unbearable. July and August, if you can avoid it, I'd say avoid. Even in the mountains, it's going to be pretty hot. Unless you're up in elevation and it's like there's snow, it's going to be pretty hot and unbearable. And in fact, like August, a lot of Italians take the month of August off, or a few weeks off in August. It's called Ferragosto. Um, so a lot of things that you'd want to do are going to be closed. Like some restaurants would be closed and things like that. So if you can avoid August, probably would. And that's when Italians go and do their vacations. So a lot of them will go to Puglia and other regions. Quite honestly, away from a lot of the tourists. So yeah, so keep that in mind with the weather when you're visiting Italy during the summer. It's going to be very hot. My cousin joined me for a trip, and she had one of those portable. She had the manual fans, but then also a portable battery-powered fan. So just yeah, keep that in mind. And then this summer, with the Catholic celebration that's held every 25 years, there's going to be a lot more people. It's going to be a lot hotter in the city. Another thing I wish I'd known, if you're making big purchases in Italy, so you're allowed to bring a certain amount back to the United States, I think without paying customs, like a few $100s, but definitely check that. But in Italy, you have to pay a value added tax on a lot of the goods that you buy. But because we're not residents of Italy, we get a refund of that. Thank you. Grazie. Um, we get a refund of that VAT. So I think if you pay for anything over $70 that you buy, so say you go buy a Gucci bag or a Gucci shirt or something like that, that's $100 or more, then you will get that VAT back, which I think is 7% or it can be 10%. Or I don't remember exactly, but it adds up. And then what you do is when you're leaving the airport, when you're leaving Europe, there are these different stations. So actually, first you have to check with the store that you're buying at. So a lot of them will have even signs up saying that they can do the VAT refund. They'll process it. They'll send the information to the company that issues the refund, and then I think there are like three or four different companies that handle, or two or three different companies that handle that. You'll see their locations in the airport when you're leaving Europe, and you just go there. You show them the receipt, and then they'll give you either a refund to your credit card or they'll give you the cash right there. So definitely remember that, and it adds up. If it's like 20, 30 euros, it adds up. So, anyways, another thing I wish I'd known when traveling to Europe and to Italy in particular is when you're leaving the Schengen area. So the Schengen area is most of the European countries, but not all countries that are in the European Union are part of Schengen. But when you're leaving that area, you have to go through passport control. So it's another step. So you have to go through security, and then you have to go through customs and passport control, and that can take some time. So just keep that in mind when you get into the airport. So like Chicago, I'm leaving Chicago. I'll show up to Chicago's airport 30 minutes, 45 minutes before my flight. Don't do that if you're leaving from Rome or from Milan, or just exiting the Schengen area. Because again, not only do you have to go through regular security, and if you don't have fast track security, that can take quite a bit of time. So if you have the option of adding fast track security to pay for it, like through Ryanair, or if you're executive platinum or you have status on your airline, you can get access to the fast track security, and it'll save you so much time. But then once you clear security, you have to go through passport control, and again, that can take quite some time. So just keep that in mind. I almost missed a flight because, yeah, I didn't realize that I had to go through passport control for that particular flight. And then another thing I'll talk about, I'll do a video on like just travel tips. But one thing I wish I'd purchased, particularly when I'm flying coach, is AR or VR glasses, and I use glasses from X-Real, and they're just glasses. They kind of look like sunglasses with a cord hanging off of them, and I use those on every flight now, even if I'm flying business class or premium economy, because they connect to my iPhone using USB-C, and then I can watch my videos, and it's like having a 120-inch screen in front of my face, and it just makes things much more bearable. So I'm just watching a few videos kind of in my private space, and then also if I need to work on something confidential, I can have my laptop open, shut off the screen on the laptop, use the keyboard, and then have the virtual screen in front of my face. So I use that when I'm flying domestically in the United States when I need to work on something that's confidential. So yeah, so we're now at about 30 minutes. That was a lot there, but these are just some of the things that I wish I'd known when I was traveling to Italy for the first time. It's such a beautiful country, beautiful language, and I wish you the best travels or the safest travels. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the comment section below. Salute. Salute means bless you. And yeah, until the next video. Ciao.